When I was a kid, my blue MP4 player was my constant companion. I spent hours every day with it, lost in music that seemed to make the world disappear. It wasn't just an electronic device, it was my escape, my source of joy, and my favorite way to pass the time. I remember how I used to sit in my room, headphones on, and let the music wash over me. The MP4 was always within arm's reach, whether I was lounging on my bed or sitting at my desk. It felt like a part of me, and I couldn't imagine a day without it. The thought of losing it was unbearable. One afternoon, as I was preparing to listen to my favorite playlist, I reached for my MP4, only to find it was missing. I searched everywhere, under the bed, in my drawers, and even in the pockets of every jacket I owned. I retraced my steps, looking in every nook and cranny of the house. The more I searched, the more frantic I became. My heart raced as I imagined it slipping behind furniture or getting lost in some forgotten corner. The house felt increasingly empty and silent, amplifying my growing sense of dread. I knew it was somewhere in the house, but no matter how hard I looked, it remained stubbornly elusive. As I walked down the hallway, trying to calm myself and think of where I might have left the MP4, something unbelievable happened. Out of nowhere, my MP4 suddenly fell right in front of me, hitting the floor with a sharp thud. It seemed to come from above, as if it had dropped from a height much greater than where I was standing. I stood there frozen, my mind racing to understand how this could happen. There were no shelves or furniture in the corridor, nothing that could have caused it to drop like that. The MP4 landed with a jarring noise, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I couldn't make sense of it, my heart pounded with a mix of fear and confusion as I stared at the broken device lying on the floor. In a sheer panic, I bolted from the hallway, not even taking a second look at the MP4. My heart was racing, and I felt a primal urge to escape. I ran to my aunt and uncle's house, which was just in the same backyard, and burst through their door, barely able to catch my breath. I tried to explain what happened, but my words came out in a jumbled mess. The fear was overwhelming, and I could hardly think straight. I stayed there for hours, too afraid to go back home and face whatever had just happened. When I finally mustered the courage to return, my parents had arrived, and I was still shaken. The whole time, I kept replaying the incident in my mind, struggling to rationalize what I had seen and felt. When I walked back into my house, the sight that greeted me was both relieving and unsettling. My MP4 was lying exactly where it had fallen, right in the middle of the hallway. I bent down to pick it up, and as soon as I saw it, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The screen was cracked, a clear sign of a fall. I picked it up with trembling hands, trying to convince myself that everything was normal. But the fear from earlier still clung to me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. My mind raced with questions, trying to piece together what had just happened. Was it a figment of my imagination? Or was there something more sinister at play? The broken MP4 and the memory of it falling from thin air left me with a lingering sense of unease, a fear that would haunt me for a long time. My bedroom has always been different from most. Instead of a door, there's just a curtain. From my bed, I can see everything outside the room, but from the hallway, no one can see in. It's a strange setup, but I got used to it over the years. Every night, my mom has a routine. She blesses the entire house before she goes to bed. It's something she does religiously, especially the living room area right before she heads to her own bedroom. One night, as usual, I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone. I heard my mom making her way through the house, saying her prayers and blessing each room. She paused in front of the curtain to my bedroom. I could see her standing there, but she didn't move. Why isn't she leaving? I thought. It felt odd, so I glanced down and saw her feet. They were just standing there, perfectly still. I decided to get up and check. Standing in front of the curtain, I hesitated for a moment. From my side, I couldn't see anyone through the thin fabric, but the feet were still there, motionless. My heart started to race as I reached out and pulled the curtain aside. To my shock, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, yet I had clearly seen those feet just moments ago. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. My mind raced through every possible explanation, but none of them made sense. Then, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic sound coming from my mom's room. I tiptoed down the hall and peeked inside. There she was, sound asleep, her gentle snores filling the room. My blood ran cold as I realized she had been asleep the entire time. Whoever, or whatever, I had seen outside my room wasn't her. As the realization set in, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Yet, as bizarre as the situation was, I couldn't bring myself to investigate further. I quietly returned to my room, closed the curtain, and climbed back into bed. I switched off my phone and lay there, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, or maybe my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something unexplainable had happened. With a mix of fear and denial, I eventually drifted off to sleep, hoping that whatever I saw would never return. When I was a child, I loved swinging on any seesaw I could find. When we moved to a new house that had a mango tree in the backyard, I made a swing there. It became my favorite spot. One evening, I was on the swing with a friend, taking turns and chatting. The lights in the backyard were burned out, so the only illumination came from a nearby street light. As we took turns on the swing, I suddenly felt something grab the back of the swing and begin to shake it violently. I could feel the pressure of hands gripping it, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. In sheer panic, I leaped off the swing, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around the dimly lit yard, searching for any sign of what could have caused the disturbance, but there was nothing, just the darkness and the flickering light of the street lamp. My friend and I quickly ran back inside, shaken and confused. As we gathered our composure inside, my mind raced with what had just happened. I tried to rationalize it, maybe it was just a trick of the shadows or an animal moving in the bushes. But deep down, the experience left me with a gnawing fear that something unseen had been there with us. I never went back to that swing alone, and even now, years later, the memory of those unseen hands still sends shivers down my spine. When I was little, I had a Samsung phone that I absolutely adored. It wasn't just a phone to me, it was my lifeline to games, music, and everything that made my days brighter. I remember how I'd always have it with me, whether I was playing games or just listening to my favorite songs. It was a comforting presence, something I relied on every single day. It felt like a special friend that was always there to keep me entertained and connected. I can't even begin to describe how much I loved that phone, and it was hard to imagine my daily life without it. One day, while I was playing with my phone, I accidentally dropped it. The screen shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, and I was overwhelmed with frustration. I felt this surge of anger and disappointment because my beloved phone was now damaged. In a moment of sheer exasperation, I blurted out, "I hope this phone just disappears." I was so upset that I didn't even think about what I was saying. It was as if I wanted to erase the damage and my frustration altogether. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of something strange. The next morning, I woke up with the hope of finding my phone and maybe just seeing the screen crack as a bad dream. But when I went to look for it, it was nowhere to be found. I searched everywhere, under the bed, in every drawer, and even in the pockets of my clothes. I retraced my steps from the previous day, but the phone was completely missing. The more I searched, the more anxious I became. It was like the phone had vanished into thin air, and the thought of it being gone filled me with a strange mix of dread and confusion. How could something I was so attached to just disappear like that? Weeks went by, and I continued to search for my missing phone, but it never turned up. Then, we decided to renovate the house, thinking maybe the phone had slipped into some forgotten corner during the construction. Every inch of the house was torn apart and restructured, and I thought for sure we would find it during the process. I remember watching as the walls were torn down and the floors were lifted, hoping with each moment that my phone would finally be discovered. But despite all the changes and the thorough searching, the phone remained elusive. The fact that it had disappeared completely, even after such a major upheaval, made me feel uneasy and bewildered. Even after all the searching and renovations, the phone was never found. I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something strange had happened. It was as if the phone had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. the incident left me with a lingering sense of unease and curiosity. I couldn't stop wondering if my outburst had somehow triggered something supernatural or if there was a simple explanation I just couldn't grasp. To this day, the disappearance of my phone remains one of the most mysterious and eerie events from my childhood. It's a reminder of how sometimes things can disappear without a trace, and how some mysteries are never really solved.